Hello and welcome to the Primary PE Huddle podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Education. Aspire Active Education is a passionate family who all believe that PE, sport and physical activity are essential for children to develop a love of healthy living and to end physical inactivity forever. We've proven that working in collaboration with school leadership teams, PE subject leaders, teachers and all PE practitioners positively impacts the sustainability of schools embedding a powerful physical curriculum and essentially helps more children be more active more often. Our mission is to engage 1 million children in physical activity by 2025, and we hope this podcast brings others along our journey with us. Through this podcast series, we aim to discover the power behind PE, school sport and physical activity, specifically in primary schools, the impact this has on the whole school, the impact it has on pupils' holistic development, and the secrets behind the successful implementation of a powerful physical curriculum. This is what makes up the Primary PE Huddle. We won't be alone through this journey. We're joined by PE subject leaders, school and academy senior leadership teams, experts in the field of primary education, and representatives of key sector bodies, who all share what physical activity means to them, how they use it as a tool to positively impact children and young people, and what they believe in the Primary PE Huddle. Our guests perform a deep dive on topics such as creating sustainable high quality PE, the benefits of physical activity, a top-down collaboration to embed a physically active ethos, and sharing of best practice from their own experiences to create an enthusiastic culture towards a healthy and active lifestyle. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for another podcast. Special treat today. It's in person. It's after COVID. It's in person. I've got Steve with me. I'll let Steve introduce himself in a second. You can see us together. A bit of a different camera angle for those of you that see the snippets. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the Primary PE Huddle podcast. As I mentioned in every episode, I hate to introduce people because I'll get something wrong and do you an injustice. So, Steve, would you mind letting our listeners know who you are and a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Stephen Clarke. I'm the Chair of Governor at a middle school in Staffordshire. I've been a governor for probably about 14 years now. So in Staffordshire, they have a three-tier school system. So you go primary, middle and high school. So I've kind of followed my kids through that process. But I've kind of settled onto being a chair of governors for middle school because I really like that as an ethos in the school, and that's really helped me to grow and help them out as well. So I was governor there, and then the chair of governors left. He was the longest serving governor in Staffordshire at the time, so it was big shoes to fill. Yeah. So I've been chair of governors there for the past 3 years.
Fantastic. So slightly different perspective, which is fantastic because we have listeners from all different kind of schools. We have qualified teachers, we have people leads that aren't qualified teachers, we have sports coaches, we have people from coaching organisations and other bodies as well. Yeah. And a lot of people are used to the normal primary and secondary. I know I certainly was, and when I came across middle schools, I didn't have a clue what was going on. But obviously middle schools, it's year 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's correct, yeah. So it's that transition period that a lot of people aren't used to, but again, a lot of relevant information, so it's going to be fantastic. So I'm going to pick your brains on that one.
Go ahead.
And first and foremost, I'd like to give listeners the platform, shall I say, to stand up and say something they've been dying to get out there and just dispel one of those myths. It's great to get a governor's perspective as well, because from different levels in the educational hierarchy, shall we say, there are many different perceptions of governors, but equally chairs of governors. So have you come across any myths or perceptions of governors that you'd like to say, that's not what we're about, that's not what we do?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think people would tend to think that governors get involved in the day-to-day elements of a school, but a governor is very much liaising with the senior leadership team within a school. So very much at the strategic and vision level. I sort of equate being on a board of governors similar to being like on a board of directors within a company. Yeah. And the chair of governors is sort of equivalent to a managing director on there. And then the other directors of that board each have their own different skill set. So really, it's not about getting involved into the day-to-day runnings of the school, although I'm sure if there's any of the governors listening, they have probably gotten more involved over the past 2 years with schools than maybe they have it in previously. But it's all about setting the strategy, setting the vision for the school, and for the school then to take that and make it happen. And for the governors to then monitor and challenge to ensure that just happens.
Yeah, and it's as you mentioned in organisations, in everything that happens, you need to have that accountability. And some of the perceptions we come across are that, like you said, some governors actually know exactly what's going on hands-on in the school, and some out there are. But then there's the flip side of that perception that governors are actually nothing to do with the day-to-day, and they might be a bit disjointed from what's happening on the ground and what, say, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Smith on the ground in the school trying to implement these things in the PE is experiencing and coming across. What do you think about that flip side perception where the governors aren't as engaged and not actually seeing what's happening on the ground?
Yeah, so just from my own personal point of view and my school, I speak to the head teacher every week.
Okay.
In relation to school, in relation to the PE element of the school, what we do have and what we find that probably that most schools have is they have what's called a linked governor.
Yeah.
And that linked governor very much is on the coming board because of their skill set, of their enthusiasm for PE. So they will be actively encouraged to go into the school, to get involved, to observe lessons, to ask those challenging questions, which are really important if a school then has to go through the process of an Ofsted inspection, but also really important to ensure that PE gets a voice at sort of the top table, if you like.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think from the many episodes we've already done, piece of leaders we've spoken to and so on, that's something that has been a bit of an obstacle, where they say trying to get SLT and governors on board with their ideas. They've found that really difficult. So I suppose having you here is opportunity. It's fantastic because it is the other side of the fence. So for those PE leaders that are listening, that are running PE, trying to implement these strategies from not that very top level, what little bit of advice, just to round this little bit off, what little bit of advice would you give to that PE subject leader to try and ensure that they're getting that support from governors? Like you said, the linked governor, lots of schools may have them. The PE subject leader might not be aware of who it is or what support is available to them.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to PE leaders listening to this?
So I would say if you've not had a contact with your linked governor within the school, then just reach out to them. The head teacher will know who that linked governor is. Sometimes I appreciate within schools it's not widely publicised who the linked governor is, and sometimes they don't know, and governors change and can change over time. But I would say if you've not had contact with your linked governor, or you've not developed that relationship with them, then definitely make the effort to do that. It's a two-way street in terms of that communication. So even if that's an exchange of emails or governor visiting the school or a phone call, that relationship's really important because both parties have a lot to learn from each other.
That's it, and that's come out from perspective of many teachers actually, is that the communication side of things. In a recent episode on the Primary Huddle was, I believe it was Louisa that said that you're not on your own, you're not alone in this, and sometimes as a subject lead, any subject lead, you can feel isolated because it's on you. And something she was really pushing was you are not alone. Communicate, get those things. So I'm glad that links up. So you mentioned governors. You did a brief overview on how that might look, but for those out there that might not have had any dealings with governors, they might be even a qualified teacher, or they might not have been involved in any governors meetings or anything along those lines. And again, hear about governors through the grapevine, and may see them every now and again. Can you just give a bit more explanation to actually the role of governors and what they do?
Yeah, so the body of governors really holds the school to account, holds the school leader to account, and it's really about ensuring the children have the best possible educational outcomes, really. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is they look after the financial performance of the school to ensure that the money is well spent and it's well targeted, This includes things like the PE sports premiums as well. And then they engage with the pupils, the staff, and the parents, and the wider community. So an example of one thing I did with my school is the school has something called Pupil Voice, where selection pupils come in and they talk to the head teacher about the things that they like and don't have within school.
It's not always just raw pizza in the canteen.
But that was quite good because the first time I've been and sat in on one of those, and it's really interesting to get feedback from the pupils themselves as the things they like and they don't like about school and what's important to them, really, which may not necessarily be obvious to governors such as themselves.
Yeah, and again, I talk about perspectives and perceptions quite a bit. I bet that was both a bit exciting but also daunting for the pupils. Did it take them a little bit of time to warm up to that?
Actually, they were brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant. You would imagine that. You would imagine that going into the head teacher's office to see the head teacher and a chair of governors would have been a scary prospect.
Yeah.
But the people were absolutely brilliant, massively confident, and certainly didn't worry about this and coming forward with everything.
And it's those opportunities when we talk about PE, sport, physical activity, and people are coaching stereotypical points of view about that. But it's, for me, a huge importance on those opportunities in sport is to learn those life skills, that confidence, to be able to walk into a room and communicate what it was to communicate and not be flabbergasted or really put in the situation, because day-to-day life we're put in those situations. From one day to next we can be put in front of a room with X amount of people and think, there's a lot of people, this is really daunting, how do I handle this? From a young age they've experienced that, and that's fantastic, that's brilliant. Okay, so you mentioned about the fact that chair governance is about kind of like a managing director.
Kind of thing,
and in fact you've been doing it 3 years now as a chair of governance. So how is the position of the chair of government and their responsibility different to the governors in general?
So chair of governors really acts as, it's a term you'll see, look at Ofsted things, it acts as kind of a critical friend to the head teacher. So they are there to support and to challenge the head teacher. So really, again, going back to the past couple of years we've had, it's never been a role more important than supporting those head teachers as we sort of went through the need for schools to adapt and change on an almost unprecedented scale. And that support was really important. I think if you speak to most head teachers, the support from the chair was really critical in that time to ensure that schools are keeping within government guidance.
Yes.
And also things like risk assessments. I mean, over the past 2 years, I've learned far more about risk assessments than I've ever learned in my entire life. When you get onto version 60 of your risk assessment, it's you realise you've learned a lot. But I think the chair really helps to build that team, and going back to sort of what I was saying about that board of directors. So you're looking for governors that have experience in HR, for example, have experience in PE and sports. That's really, really important. That have experience in teaching as well. So they may be teachers themselves, which is really good. And really useful to have on the board of governors' parents as well. To get that parental feedback on what their view of the school and what the school could be doing better. And I suppose on the other side of that is the kind of pastoral support that pupils are getting as well. So that's really important.
It's interesting on the parent government side of things. I'm my dad being a parent governor at my secondary school, and how their perspectives can very much differ, because obviously everyone's there for the same reason, but they might not be a qualified teacher. They might not know education whatsoever. Again, it's okay. You want that purely parent perspective. Through lockdown, so I want to pick up on that from what you said. What were those meetings like, and the difference of opinions in what should be happening from head teacher and compliance to teacher and children's needs to parents and what they want to?
Yeah, so during the lockdown period, as with all schools, all our government meetings moved to Teams. They all moved online, and that was particularly challenging to some governors that may not be skilled in that particular area. But hopefully, from our school's perspective, we still got them involved in things. I guess one of the biggest challenges was that things needed to happen a lot more quickly than it would normally have happened within a school. You would have decisions made that same day, if not that hour. So that was particularly challenging for myself as chair of governors, to ensure that other governors weren't excluded from that decision-making process, but ensuring that I got back to the head teacher pretty quickly with my views. And it was that difficulty in keeping everyone involved, but ensuring that decisions weren't being held up.
Did you find it was difficult? Because again, it was a massive amount of parents with homeschooling and everything else trying to juggle. Did you find it was sometimes difficult with those conversations and the different priorities from those parent governors to, like, again, going back to the compliance of schools? Was there, and I'm sure it's in school, was there sometimes loggerheads or really differing views of what should be happening based from the parents and the children and from SLT?
Yeah, I think it was more the differing opinions was a little bit more on probably a national basis, really. Because if I think back to the during lockdown, when we first moved to remote learning for pupils, it was almost, there was a differing of national opinion. So we had, with our school, we were getting challenged sometimes to provide the pupils with live lessons. Now, live lessons are great in theory, but when everyone's not versed, and particularly younger pupils are not versed in how to behave during the live lesson and things, we took the stance of not going down that route, whereas other schools kept a timetable of live lesson after live lesson after live lesson, which were particularly challenging for people of our age, really. So I guess that's one thing that particularly sticks in my mind, that we had several discussions within schools. Should we be providing live lessons, or should we be pre-recording the lessons so people can do them at a time to suit themselves? And we went down that pre-recording route because we felt that for parents, it would have been challenging to ensure their child sat in front of a computer from this time to this time. And with pre-recording them, we could ensure that parents and pupils could do them at a time to suit themselves, rather than be in a prescriptive timetable. Now, that didn't suit all parents. Other parents felt live lessons would have been the route to go down. So that was one of the big challenges, really. There was no right or wrong. It was just some things worked better for some parents and other things worked better for other parents.
Very difficult situation. And I want to get onto Ofsted in a second, because I know you've had Ofsted recently.
Absolutely.
But just the last thing following on the COVID side of things, and hopefully, like the world's going, hopefully we'll get back onto the normal questions. But from the governor's perspective, the whole board of governors, following lockdown, have you seen any differences in the school running in general following lockdown? Has anything changed in school running following lockdown?
I don't think anything's changed in particular. Obviously, there's funding for catch-up, so we've been spending that on tutoring the pupils to help them to catch up. But I think one of the things that was really noticeable is how, just going back to sort of the lockdown period a little bit, is how difficult it was to teach those practical lessons like PE, like design and technology, and how much as a focus for our school really has been, since pupils have come back into school, is to really ensure those things go ahead. So all the school trips that they couldn't do, to ensure that they go ahead. All the theatre trips, all the zoo trips, all those things that pupils really missed during that period of time. That online learning is great and it has its worth, but those particular social activities for the pupils and the mixing and learning in the outside world were the things that we felt as a school they particularly missed.
Like I said before, when you said about pupils coming, people voice speak to yourself and head teacher, it's that confidence, it's those life skills.
Absolutely.
So many of them missed out on, and people talking now about lockdown children, lockdown babies who don't have some of those skills because a key 2 years of their life, from the very young years, early years, have been missed. So hopefully we can give them those opportunities, and that comes back around.
Absolutely, yeah.
So now honing on the Ofsted side of things, because that's one big reason why on the podcast that I really wanted to pick out from this was you recently had Ofsted. So from that inspection, the school, sorry, to make it clear to listeners, you as in your school where you're chair of learners. Can you tell us a bit about that and a bit about what Ofsted went into and the inspection as a whole, and those that may not have experienced one can maybe get some idea of what to expect when it happens?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our Ofsted inspection literally just about 2 weeks ago. We kind of expected it to happen. We've been doing quite a bit of prep work as governors to ensure that we knew, what was expected within the inspection itself. But we did have it arrive literally a week before our SATs, which was particularly challenging for the school themselves. Now, ours wasn't a full inspection, it's what's called an inspection 8, which is we were a good school and it's just to inspect us to ensure we are still a good school.
Right, okay.
Or potentially, are we now an outstanding school, or have we slipped below that? Yeah. So it was more of a, I suppose, a soft touch inspection is probably the phrase there. So it wasn't full, not involving everything.
Is it just schools that have had good inspections previously that have that kind of visit, or do other schools at different dams have that kind of visit as well?
You can have that different that kind of visit. Mainly it's good schools. Ofsted can be called in for other matters to deliver that particular inspection. So the inspections during that inspectors during that process have interviewed the head teacher, representatives from local government bodies, so there's myself and two other governors there, and also did, for want of a better word, a deep dive on particular subjects.
Yes, you hear deep dive quite
deep dive, and one of those particular subjects was PE in our schools, because we've got a strong PE department and there's excellent extracurricular activities within the school. So it was that we sort of steered them towards in terms of doing that particular deep dive.
Yeah, and I hear deep dive quite a lot. It's one of those where it can strike fear. It's become the new thing, because there's always something that's good. So this is the focus. This is the focus. And as soon as deep dive, that phrase came in, that's the fearful factor. Yeah, it doesn't mean you're looking, but that's the fearful factor. Don't have to go into any depth, but for those PE leads that are listening that might be worried about a deep dive in PE, can you settle their nerves in any way? Is it less scary than it sounds?
Well, I would say that it's the first time I've been at school that's had an Ofsted, so it's just completely brand new.
Right, okay.
I have to say, Ofsted weren't as scary as maybe given their perception. Certainly not the Ofsted inspectors I had. They were very fair. But I would really, if you're having an Ofsted inspection, we'd just focus on what the Ofsted framework is about, which is in looking at intent, implementation and impact. So what the intentions are when you design your PE curriculum. Yeah. Is the PE curriculum sort of ambitious enough for your children to make good progress? And what sort of checks have been made? How has it been implemented? What audits have happened on the needs of their sort of fellow PE colleagues? And ensuring that a good CPD program is in place for PE teachers, and that's monitored and ensured that all PE teachers go through that particular process.
So on the CPD side, is that something that Ofsted really like to see taking place in the subject? Is that something they can hone in on? Or?
Yeah, I think it's important that the CPD's down there, is documented, it's evidenced, and the PE teachers have been through and have an ongoing program there to help and train the PE teachers.
And you mentioned documented and evidence, and sometimes that's something that goes, okay, how do I evidence what's going on? Is there anything from the governor's perspective you like to see when the head teacher reporting back to you on CPD that's taking place? What is it you want to see from CPD taking place in the school?
So what we want to see is to ensure that teachers in the school have been through the appropriate training that they're supposed to do. Okay. And that training program is ongoing. It's not just a tick box exercise, really. Yes. That the school invests in that training. And that's kind of what makes for a good and outstanding school, that they have that program in place.
And you mentioned about ongoing, like something that's overlooked sometimes is the DFE teacher CPD guidance document. It's quite sad. I read 14 pages long. But that's something that, from my experience, a lot of PEs, a lot of teachers in general, haven't seen that document. And that's obviously guidance from the DFE of what CPD looks like. And they use interesting words like rhythmic and systematic. Ongoing is another one. It's highlighted, those words are highlighted in bold. And a lot of CPD for a lot of subjects can be go away to this one day thing, have this inset. And they're invaluable because that's a boost in knowledge. We should go to those events and have those things. But it's interesting that you mentioned about the ongoing side of things being focused.
Absolutely.
Because that again is something that can sometimes be overlooked and how to implement that ongoing side of things. So a bit more on the deep dive from Ofsted and in relation to PE. Is there anything else you could highlight for anyone that's really preparing for a deep dive or wants to prepare, even though they know it's not going to happen yet?
Yeah. I suppose things that we were discussing earlier about the PE and sport premium. So ensuring that sort of supports the school and contributes to the school, and again, can be evidence as to how it's raising standards and improving standards within the school itself. I mean, I've not spoken to, because it's been so recent, I've not spoken to the PE subject lead in our school. But the kind of questions I would imagine they'd be asking the PE subject leads would be, how do you design your curriculum fits in with the national curriculum? That's a broad curriculum that you've got in PE. How does it improve the child's wider knowledge? So not just the PE lesson itself. How is it improving them to be a sort of a whole child, for want of a better word? And really the sort of model of PE progression that you've adopted in school and how that's assessed as well. That's really important. And our PE teacher was, as I mentioned, they're part of a deep dive. And they would have asked him beforehand, what am I going to see in this lesson? What am I expecting to see? And what are going to be the outcomes of this lesson before the lesson actually took place? To ensure things matched up together. And I think also looking at underachieving groups and how they are performing and how your lessons counter that as well as something Ofsted would be looking for. And how varied, I mentioned about the extracurricular activity, how varied that is, whether all pupils are getting involved in that, and if they're not, what are you as a school doing about that to get them more involved in those extracurricular
That's
activities?
a stumbling block for a lot of schools. A lot of schools have great engagement data for upper key stage 2 mainly. A lot then have whole of key stage 2, and then it starts to struggle as you go down the years. And there are a lot of schools I've worked with and are out there that do have a broad range, which is fantastic. But I know that is a stumbling block to get the whole school engaged. And even when you have a strong upper key stage 2 or key stage 2 offering, sometimes it's only the same children. So
that's true. Yeah.
You mentioned your school has a really good extracurricular offering. What is it that they've done so well to enable that?
I would say what they have is a very broad range of activities for children. Not necessarily just all within sport and PE. So, for example, your Lego clubs, Warhammer clubs, those sort of things.
Warhammer clubs.
Yeah, exactly. But they have a broad range of extracurricular activities for I would say, for children of all abilities there, and to meet those needs, to ensure that each pupil has something that they can excel in.
It is again those opportunities, because things such as competition can come into everything. By the broad spectrum side of things, it's that more spiritual, cultural side of it. It's how from your perspective of what you've seen has PE, school thought, and physical activity, all three areas, impacted on that side of things?
I think what's really important is we're discussing about the whole child and PE affecting the whole child. And I think it's not just the physical health and well-being of the child as well. It's the mental health and well-being that particular child and how PE can benefit that as well. And never more so than the past 2 years when pupils are coming out of lockdown. How can PE engage them to help them emotionally as well as mental and physical?
Yeah, and I don't put me on the spot this one, but sometimes it can be hard to make the link between physical activity and sport and mental well-being. But on the flip side, some people may look at that and say, well, that's easy because physical activity is better mental well-being, so let's get them active. But actually, does that necessarily always mean better, mindfulness and mental health? So it's tricky for people that are looking at this going, I know mental health and well-being is high on the agenda. Does that mean I need to incorporate more mental health and well-being theory lessons and opportunities for the children? Or is it a case of actually, if we just get them more physically active, that's going to have them more effect? What's your just personal opinion on that?
I think there's both sides to that, really. Getting them more physically active within school, but also ensuring that they have that mental health support as well. So within our school, we invested more into an external emotional support service, so that pupils had someone to talk to both in school and if we needed to refer them on, we had that referral point there. So we as governors put more money into it, release budget to put more into that. But I think it's essential that all schools invest in PE and the right equipment and the right activities for pupils. But also I think it's important just on the PE subject leaders to ensure to fed back into governance so they realise the importance of it, and that's where the link governor comes into play, so that PE is discussed and on the agenda at government meetings. Yeah, so it's like you said, it's that link governor, but it's again on previous episodes, it's not being afraid to make those communication links. I've done this as a PE, this is the impact I want to make sure. But as a chair of youngers, would you yourself welcome, obviously not every meeting, but say the PE to come in and present some of that back and actually have those conversations in the governor's meetings? Is that something that can take? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we already have that within maths and English as those core subjects. But I think, yes, definitely to come in and present, or even to be part of the governing body themselves. So those PE subject leads to be part of the governing body, because that really gives a voice to PE if you've got a member of staff as part of your governing board that is a subject of PE. So I would actively encourage anyone that sees a staff position on the governing board as a PE subject lead to go for that.
You heard it here first, everybody. If you're a PE lead, get on that governing body, get on that board. And that, I mean, that, like you said, having that direct link, and you can often have a fantastic team that really build the ethos of PE, school sport, physical activity across the school. Some people are in a position where they feel like they're on their own, they're isolated. So actually, and we'll talk about the top-down approach in a moment. I always talk about the top-down approach and getting that support. So sometimes it takes that just that confidence both to make that link and have those conversations. So looking at governors, the support they offer, the Ofsted inspections, because again, going back to that frightful phrase of deep dives, how can a PE subject lead get support from the governor in that sense? Because a governor, you mentioned you haven't experienced it, but there'll be governors that have. There'll be governors that will know more about what Ofsted want to see, what they want to be doing. How can the government support a PE specifically on that?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what I was mentioning before about having the elite governors. Yeah, so there's no legal requirement for schools to have governor.
Right.
But I think most schools and most governing bodies would see how really important that is to have someone who is in school looking at those particular subjects, be it PE, be it IT, and then they can feed back to the main governing body there. But I think your question in particular on Ofsted, what's really important during the Ofsted inspection process is for governors to support, whilst challenging, the school. And I think having the master inspection sometimes can be quite a scary experience for a teacher who's not been through that process before. And even if you have been through that process before, it can probably be quite a scary experience. So just being someone there that the key subject lead can talk to, I think is really important. So, whereas I'm there really for the head teacher to talk to and for me to support the head teacher, I would see a PE link governor being there to support the PE subject lead, and particularly during master inspection to make sure that everything's in place, they've got the evidence there, and they're providing the emotional support of that PE subject lead as well.
Yeah, and that, again, we talk about mental health and wellbeing, we look at the children, what we can't forget about the staff, and you mentioned sometimes the staff feel isolated, and then you're out of that what's been going on with COVID, and the stress of trying to do home lessons, do recorded lessons.
Absolutely.
Now they've got to catch up and support the children, they're probably putting 10 times as much effort in on top of what they're doing already to try and make sure that's happened. So, I mean, that is crucial. I say the word crucial there, but personal thoughts and feelings, what kind of advantage do you feel a school with a PE governor would have over a school who hasn't got a PE governor?
I think there's two things: the support for the PE subject leads by having a link governor. So someone that can talk to, someone that can be a sounding board for ideas. I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? So I think a school without those link governors kind of loses that. So that's the first, it's that communication between the link governor and the PE subject lead. But also, talking specifically about PE is bringing PE as a subject to the governing body's attention. Because along with other subjects, because English and maths is such a key focus for schools, sometimes get not forgotten about, but they're not given as much prominence as perhaps they ought to be.
And everyone knows that Christmas play stages up, PE's not happening, and it's that common. We joke about it, and PE leads joke about it because it's one of those where if you don't joke, you're going to lose your mind, And because you mentioned about maths and English governors and staff governors on the board because they're core subjects, there's a continuous argument and debate about PE being a core subject, and the higher importance that would then place. But then there's counter arguments about red taping PE, physical activity. Again, putting you on the spot, what do you think about PE being a core subject alongside English and maths in schools?
I think that's a difficult question. I think English and maths are so important within school. I'm not saying that PE isn't, but our education structure is very focused towards English and maths, isn't it, really? But what I would say is, going back to my point about if you're a PE subject lead, ensuring you put yourself forward to be a staff member on the governing body, that gives you a good voice. It really does, to ensure that your needs and thoughts get debated within the governor environment.
So without the subject being a core subject, if you have that presence or a presence on the governing body, it can hold almost not quite as much, but maybe almost as much weight and a lot more weight than if you didn't have that presence.
Absolutely,
So, I mean, I like to always finish off with 5 key tips, and I may have drawn some of those out throughout it. So, I know there's been some gems throughout, and I always like to make sure put people on the spot every now and again. Hopefully, some gems will drop out, and our listeners can take away some fantastic ideas and take some confidence as well from what you've said about my focus. I've listened to Stephen about from the governor's perspective, and he's pushing this. I'm going to play this podcast episode to my teacher now and say this is what I need to do. But just, I suppose, to round off with really 5 key things, 5 key tips for you for a PE subject lead, anyone facilitating PE in primary or middle schools, because it's definitely still relevant. That you would give to help them embed the ethos. I spoke about ethos before, across the school, from the top down, from the governors, to get that support throughout. What would your 5 key tips be?
Yes, I suppose really is trying to ensure as much as possible that the school's extracurricular activities include all pupils. From whatever their skills and abilities are, that they're all involved within extracurricular activities. And going back to Ofsted, that's evidenced and detailed that you've done that as a particular school. On the link governor side, ensure they're actively involved in the school, and if they're not actively involved in the school, as a PE subject lead, you make that contact with them to get them, to encourage them to come in. I think that's really important.
I know it's big of another difficult position. If they're not actively engaged and involved, a PE subject lead just hope we've got this lead going fantastic, but hold of them. the engagement point. What's your advice? What would you say to do to try and make sure, or try and get support in getting that connection?
Yeah, so I think possibly just to from the piece of journey, just to speak to their line manager or their head teacher, really, because it may be the your PE linked governor has a job where they're working away a lot, and maybe that they find it really difficult to get into school. However, they have email, they have Teams, they have a phone, so it's not necessarily they have to visit the school, although it's actively encouraged that they should visit the school. But it may be that they struggle in their personal position to have to get into school. So it may be that it's not about them not wanting to get into school.
Of course
they might struggle to get into school. So I would say to the PE subject leader, speak to their teacher, say, I'm really wanting to come in, and make contact with them or find their phone number or their email address if you don't have it.
I suppose don't see that as a daunting thing that government's going to come in and look at what you're doing, encourage it and say, I want your opinion or support.
Absolutely, because both sides can really learn from each other. So each can learn from the governor, and the governors can learn a lot from the subject leader, and then bring that back to their board of governors as well.
Fantastic. I interrupted your top 5 tips.
You did. So the other one I would say would be to sort of celebrate the achievements within school, sports, within social media or the local press on the school website, to ensure that sort of parents and the wider community understand why PE and sport is so important to the school and the children, the part it plays within the whole school's ethos. We talked about link governors there as well, to ensure they're communicating back to the governing body, and to ensure as a PE subject lead that as well as the link governor's name, the name of your chair of governors as well, because it's really important that gets debated around the school body as much as the other subjects within the school do, and during the governing body is a great way to do that. And I think you mentioned about if the subject lead isn't getting that involvement from their link governor, to discuss that as well with their teachers, discuss that with the chair of governors, because sometimes within the sort of selection process of governors, it may be that you've missed a trick there. There are other parents or other governors that have a sports and PE background that haven't been selected. So when that position comes up, you can ensure that the right person's in place and has the right skill set to improve the score and to improve the sort of PE provision as well.
Fantastic. Some great tips. Like I said, there's some great gems throughout, and it's really good to hear from a governor's perspective, chair of governor's perspective, especially given what's happened, coming out of what's happened,
Absolutely.
And now the pressures the added pressures, that are now on teachers across schools. So, thank you very much for joining.
Pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening. There's some fantastic gems in there. Again, subscribe if you've heard some fantastic ideas. You want to listen to more. We've got some great episodes from different perspectives of PE leads, of teachers, of head teachers, governors. Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
And hope to have you on another episode.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for the Primary PE Huddle podcast, and remember to subscribe wherever you access your pods so you don't miss an episode, and the key gems our fantastic guests share for you. You can connect with us on Twitter or X at Aspire Sports UK, and find out more about us and the family at www.aaeg.co.uk and www.aspire-ed.co.uk for PE CPD related courses and more content. Hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.